Darragh Stewart, an honour to have you here on the Modern Warrior podcast. This has been an episode that I've been so looking forward to for a period of time. You're a hard man to get because I know you do a lot of travelling and you're doing incredible work, especially in the men's circles and the men's group at the moment. And with Psychedelics, and we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of what you do and who you are and how you've come to be at this point in your life at the moment. But before we get to the present, let's go back to the past here, to what you termed yourself as being the dark night of the soul, where you fell into a pit of sorrow, misery, depression, anxiety. You're in a pretty dark place in your life. This was after the loss of quite a close family member. It was the breakdown of a long-term relationship. And it was also during the period where you were studying for your PhD. And from that darkness, you've managed to find the light, or you've managed to move towards the light again. So what did that journey look like for you over that period of time?
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, so great to be on the podcast. Very happy to be here. But looking forward to this because I've been following your work for like 4 years, I think. I came across you during the pandemic, yeah.
Thanks.
So yeah, Dark Night of the Soul. I've had a few of them to date, as I was saying earlier. But yeah, this was kind of like my quote unquote awakening almost to, who I was in the world. So my grandmother died. She was, I suppose the first person in my reality to die. So I really went through a lot of like existential questioning. What's the meaning of life? What's my purpose? She died in a lot of suffering. So I felt like she held a lot of the generational family pain, and that was never cleared with her. So,
but you didn't know that at the time, though, did you?
No, absolutely. So yeah, now I can put a lot of language on a lot of the stuff that was happening, because I have more awareness now. And then a 10-year relationship. So we broke up at that time. So I kind of had this kind of who am I identity sort of crisis. I also didn't have the label for it, but other people could see that from the external. And I was in my PhD studies in Trinity. So it was like all of this compounding stuff sent me into a pretty dark spiral of depression and like kind of anxiety. So I kind of class myself as a high functioning anxious person, which I think most people are in the science world. You got to publish or perish.
And it's almost normalized in today's world, isn't it?
Totally, yeah. Absolutely normalized, to have this like tightly strung nervous system to be producing, to be productive, to be go. I think that's what society wants ultimately, to be a worker bee, to be a worker and to produce. So yeah, these kind of things happened to me all in the space of, 6 months to a year. And I found I couldn't cope with life really. I was struggling a lot. I couldn't get up in the morning, felt like stone. I was putting on a lot of weight. I was drinking a lot as a coping mechanism. I kind of had lost my spark, lost my lust for life. Didn't kind of really know like who I was or what I was doing. Like what's the purpose of any of this? I'm not really enjoying my life, I'm just stressed and tired all the time.
What was the duration of how long did that last for?
I think it lasted for probably about a year or 2 years, I'd say.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, it was prolonged. It had, peaks and troughs, but I distinctly just remember having that one day that was kind of like, the dark night of the soul, which, I just like kind of looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, what the fuck? Like, who are you? What is going on? Like, why are you so depressed? Almost having that like self-dialogue. And then I started to meditate. So then I found Wake Up Dublin, which was actually 10 years ago, would you believe? I was looking at my Instagram there the other day, or my messages in Messenger, and I was like, oh, when are your meetings happening, or something like this? Like really naive, never been to any meditation sitting. So I went to that meditation because I started to read Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist Vietnamese monk. You Are Here, and this kind of started to send me on like a self-inquiry journey of becoming present, becoming mindful, trying to understand, what's going on with me. But at the time as well, my depression kind of manifested as physical pains in my body. So I was numbing myself with like eating lots of ibuprofen and drinking alcohol. I was never a big drinker, I was just, drinking on the weekends and then keeping it kind of sober for work during the week. But for me, my alcohol intake wasn't to what I wanted it to be, you know. So yeah, meditation, started to do yoga because of the body, started to get massage therapy as well in the body. And I found the massage therapy gave me some of the biggest releases. I still thank that massage therapist. Doesn't live in Ireland anymore, but he was almost like a counselor as well. You know, I think most massage therapists are. Mm-hmm. We hear a lot, you know. So I started to really get into the holistic world. You know, I come from a science background, molecular genetics, and had really avoided anything, you know, pseudo spiritual or holistic. You know, it has that loaded kind of loaded feeling to it, you know. But there's so much value in it. I know that now. So I trained as a massage therapist in the evenings when I finished my PhD, and this really sent me on a course of my own inner healing, kind of taking responsibility for myself. So ultimately, that dark night of the soul led me to start to take responsibility for my reality, which was almost a game changer. You know, I cut out alcohol, started hiking, getting out into nature, started looking after myself. I'd always been a fit physical guy, did a lot of sports, but I've just found in university, the pressures of life, I started to lose, you know, the gym. I didn't do any team sports anymore. So yeah, I almost started to curate my life. I saw my life as something that I wasn't enjoying. And then I started to really curate it in terms of like, how can I live my best life, or how can I live a life that is conducive to my healing, my health, my happiness? And that's really the journey I'm on now. I'm just trying to live a really impactful life where I feel like I'm in service, I'm giving to others, I'm fulfilled, I'm living some sort of purpose, and that I'm being true to my authenticity and integrity around my values and what I want for my life and for those around me. So I think that's kind of like my journey. Mm-hmm. It's really, how can I live a life of really happiness, play, and joy, and, you know, meet all my needs and, you know, help those around me.
Yeah. Do you feel that a lot of your intentions up to that point, you know, you were studying a PhD in Trinity, that a lot of your intentions, a lot of your behaviors, a lot of your actions, a lot of your actions were influenced from a place of pain more so than a place of purpose, or was it a bit of both?
I feel like I had a pretty good childhood. I've had very little trauma. I was very lucky. You know, we all have our family stuff or whatever. But I don't think I was living from a place of pain. It was more living from a place of proving myself. Proving myself to my parents, proving myself to my colleagues, proving myself to my elders, you know, and that kind of sent me down the high overachiever, perfectionist, maybe type A person, if you want to use that term, whatever, you know. I picked the hardest science you could pick out of all the sciences, you know. All the overachievers were at the queue for genetics, neuroscience, immunology. That's where all those people were standing. And then, you know, people who love nature and outdoors and are a bit more like soft around the edges were geology, zoology, you know. And I probably should have picked one of those because I love those subjects. But, you know, at the time I was like, wow, how can I like prove myself in the world? I'll pick the hardest science. And that was really, really difficult, you know. That my career of science was blood, sweat and tears for me, you know, because you have to learn so much and you have to understand so much. And I always felt I wasn't the smartest person in the room. You know, trying to prove yourself and live up to the standard, you know.
And how did that science then begin to integrate as part of your personal development journey? Or how's that played a part in it?
Yeah, I think it's those years, I don't regret them because I feel like they've informed me so much in how I live my life. You know, I have so many kind of softer skills, you know, like how to read academic papers, how to critically analyze data, how to, you know, kind of look through the woo-woo and the bullshit, you know. So I feel like those skills and that training has allowed me to see the world in quite a analytical way and with discernment, and really find out, you know, what I feel is true for me, and then to be able to like, disseminate information and facts and pull it all together, you know. Mm-hmm. So I feel like having those skills have allowed me to operate in the world in a really beneficial way, especially in the holistic world, because I feel like a lot of people in the holistic world really struggle with a lot of stuff around, you know, running businesses and reading papers and gathering information, finding out what's true, and, you know, reading papers and all this kind of stuff. So for me, I feel like it really gave me a leg up when I moved my whole career into holistic health and well-being, because I felt I was able to really just cut through so much. So yeah, I feel like that part of my life going to university really set me up for, running something quite successful.
What are some of these bullshit misconceptions that the holistic world still projects upon people at the moment that you feel challenged by?
Yeah, I think, I feel, well, it's a big one. I feel really challenged, about disempowering people around their own healing, like I'm going to come and I'm going to heal you. This kind of narrative, I think is quite dangerous because ultimately, we're the masters of our own lives and our own healing. So I always feel like the person should be empowered. And that's unfortunate because a lot of people who move into the healing space are very vulnerable people because, you're looking for healing for a reason because you're maybe a little bit broken.
Mm-hmm. And potentially feeling like a victim.
Yeah, like a victim and lost and vulnerable. So yeah, it's just it's unfortunate when people act out of that integrity, maybe around, for egoic reasons as well. So yeah, it can be a difficult space to be in, when you're just entering because you don't have discernment around teachers and who's doing what trainings and if this person's going to act in integrity or is this person going to take advantage of me or disempower me further. And I see a lot of that in the healing world, which is really unfortunate,
Have you experienced yourself?
I've definitely come across like egoic teachers where I feel like their teachings are quite self-centered and dogmatic as well. And that's another thing I feel like in the holistic space, there's a lot of dogma, like yoga is the only way or breath work is the only way, or meditation is the only way, or plant medicine is the only way, or shamanism, or whatever it is, where people are very like caught on their beliefs and over identification with a personality and a type, like I'm a shaman now, like I'm this person, I will heal you, I will do these things. And it's like just an over identification with an identity, which if you challenge that identity, then the person will act from a place of ego. And then will be probably aggressive, angry towards you, if you start to question, oh, why do you do it that way? Or why do you do it this way? Or how about this, which are always valid questions to ask, whenever working with a new teacher or a shamanic practitioner or a shaman, it's okay to ask the questions. If you get shut down from asking the questions, that's a red flag.
Stay away.
Yeah. So yeah, I've come across people like that where I've asked like, oh, why do you do this practice? Or like, what's the belief around there? Or like what informs this, and you get a very quick sense. Well, I get a very quick sense in terms of I want to work with this person or not. Like, do I resonate with this person or not? And someone who's like, I suppose, attached to the teachings being the only way. That's something for me to be kind of like, most.
You have the awareness around that now, though. For somebody that does lack the self-awareness,
yeah,
it can be a massive struggle because, as you mentioned, someone's coming there from a place of vulnerability, pain, victimhood, and then someone steps in and says, oh, I can heal all your hurt. And I can
be the knight in shining armor.
Yeah.
Armor.
And you go, wow, okay, I need this person in my life.
Yeah.
How do you sort of navigate that for an individual?
Yeah, it's a great question. I say it's always reviews, and, asking someone, do you know somebody in this space? Like finding that kind of node who can then point you in the right direction. And I feel like that's a lot of my work now is knowing many good teachers who I work with and, many amazing practitioners I've worked with that I will fully recommend to someone. You want a breathwork teacher, you want a plant medicine teacher, you want a ketamine therapist, you want a holistic psychologist, you want, a depth psychologist or an existential psychologist or whatever it is. I have that kind of network of people that I trust and, have worked for me and I've seen them work. So I think it's about like, finding that node and then being able to, look, get what you need out of that person in terms of, where you should go or who you should be working with. Yeah.
Important to acknowledge as well that now you are a practitioner of plant medicine. You didn't go straight to the plant medicine as part of your own healing journey. You had already gone through a process of meditation and yoga and being more nature, connecting more with your body before you found plant medicine. And at what point in that journey did you feel as if you were called towards plant medicine?
Yeah. So I started out with those practices and they gave me a great sense of, peace and slowing down and getting into my body. So I went from a place of being very like, yang, into a place of more yin and softness. I think psychedelics kind of found me rather than I found them. I'd never done really any substances until 24, 25. Never really even smoked a joint or smoked cigarettes. I was pretty clean, straight laced, good student. And they kind of found me. I had a profound MDMA experience, and this was the first psychoactive compound that I'd done. And
can you give us a bit of information on MDA for those who are? So
MDMA is ecstasy. It's part of the phenylethylamines class of psychedelics. Some people say it's not a classic psychedelic. It has kind of like secondary psychedelic effects, but it's an empathogen. It helps to open you up, reduce barriers. They're using it in clinical trials at the moment for people with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, or people with complex PTSD, people with trauma, anxiety. So it works on the energy of the heart. It's a heart opener, so it makes you love yourself more and love those around you. Hence why people take it in clubs. It's like one of the love molecules. And this experience really, it had a few effects on me. One, I realized that all drugs aren't bad, the kind of narrative that society had told me. Two, I had this sense of a deep self-love and a compassionate way of talking to myself, where before I feel like I was being very, very hard on myself. I had the perfectionist on my shoulder, inner critic, imposter syndrome, all of these kind of things in a kind of a high-paced science world. So I was able to really talk to myself in a more loving, compassionate way. And then the third thing that happened after that was it sent me into a really deep, introspective kind of self-inquiry journey of like analyzing my life. So that first MDMA experience I had was actually, with a friend. I was able to really look at my life and analyze everything in my life to that point that was kind of blocking me or holding me back. And I wrote it all down. I journaled for hours, and I did self-therapy on myself with that. So from that, then, I started to look up psychedelics. I started to look up plant medicine. And then, living in Ireland, we have magic mushrooms living everywhere here in the winter, or growing in the winter. So, that was probably the most secondary accessible psychedelic that I could access. And, I was quite cautious because I know there's lots of issues with psychedelics. We live in a world where psychedelics are banned and criminalized. So that causes, almost the black market of drugs, and you don't know what you're getting. You don't know the quantity. You don't know the potency. You don't know if it's clean. But, magic mushrooms are magic mushrooms. You pick them from the ground yourself. You know what you're getting, as long as you pick the right ones. So for me, I had really profound experiences with magic mushrooms and psilocybin containing truffles that just really opened me up to many, many different ways of seeing the world. They altered my perspective. I was able to look at the world through a different lens, almost like the veil had been dropped on reality. I started to tune more into myself, my body, my mind, nature, my natural surroundings, started to eat better, exercise, more time in nature, less alcohol. So I think a lot of the early experiences I had with psychedelics were really getting myself back into a place of wellness. And then I also had really big entheogenic kind of experiences with mushrooms and other psychedelics. And entheogenic experiences are kind of the mystical experiences, meeting God, divinity, feeling connected to everything, feeling love, feeling, that you're bigger than what you actually are, connecting to, universal consciousness or oceanic boundlessness, as science has stated. So these kind of bigger experiences kind of led me into spirituality more. So coming from science, I started to have these spiritual experiences that I was like, whoa, I'm having these experiences. These are real for me. So that sent me on a course of kind of looking deeper into mysticism, spirituality, and had sent me down a path of reading, Alan Watts, Anthony de Mello, Eckhart Tolle, all of these guys. I was just like, as an academic, I was reading like 2 books, 3 books a week, around spirituality, until I got kind of a bit, they're all saying the same thing. Yeah. I can't read
just
this anymore.
In a different way.
Yeah, just in a different way. You read a page and then I have to put it down. I'm thinking for 3 hours about one page and then reading it again. And, then I started to, read a bit more fiction again.
Yeah. Mix it up.
Yeah.
What was the frequency between the psilocybin? Was this almost like a daily thing or weekly thing for a period of time, or was there some space in between each of those trips for you?
Yeah, I think at the time I was having a few big experiences a year with higher doses, and then working with smaller doses on a when I kind of felt it basis.
Microdosing.
Yeah, more than microdosing.
Okay.
So yeah, more than microdosing. So microdosing is just taking a little bit that's sub-perceptual. It won't really like change much for you. It'll just make you like a bit more in tune with yourself in a flow state. Then you kind of have the threshold doses, which would be like the low doses where you would feel something and you can do maybe some self-inquiry work or some practices, and things are heightened for you. So yeah, having these kind of altered states of consciousness, I felt that I was able to kind of do certain practices, whether it was yoga, breath work, meditations, or whatever, and these were amplified. So I was getting a lot more from these practices. And then the bigger journeys were helping me have this kind of catharsis, which catharsis is release. So I was having these release of emotions. So I think most of my early big psychedelic journeys, I was just bawling my eyes out, crying or screaming in pain or shaking or just agony or grief or whatever it was just being released from my body. Sometimes you don't even need to know what's being released, because the mind always wants to put a story on things. But, a lot of the stuff that's stored in the body is just energy, and that energy has been trapped from traumatic events. Bessel van der Kolk talks a lot about this in his book, The Body Keeps a Score. And Gabor Mate as well talks a lot about, the trauma that's stored in the body. So, these psychedelic experiences help people release cathartically. Energy just wants to move, emotions, energy, emotion. So having these big releases, I started to feel cleaner. I started to feel clearer. I started to feel lighter, more open, more connected to myself. Energy could flow. I had more spark, more light in my life. So when I feel like when people talk about getting that big reset with psychedelics, that's almost like a prelude. They have the catharsis where they release. It's kind of like a cleanse, You're just really cleaning the muck out, all the black goo that's been stored in that pipe, which is your body. When that's kind of cleared and cleansed, then people feel lighter, they feel open, they feel like they can, live happier, healthier lives. They can do tasks because you're not kind of stuck down, you're not stagnant. You can kind of move again. So yeah, a lot of the early experiences were just like cleaning myself, and that's a lot of the spiritual practices. If you look at, yoga or some of the meditations, a lot of the practices are actually cleansing practices. You're just cleansing and clearing. And when the vessel is cleansed and clear, then you can do the work. And you can go deep inside yourself, do the introspection. You can do the deeper kind of, I suppose, spiritual or psychological work from a place of having done cleansing and clearing.
Yeah. I can relate because I've done a mushroom retreat, and it's not something I've talked about a lot, but those who are closest to me know about it. But yeah, I can relate to the release, because I remember throughout that process of taking the mushrooms, and I felt this surge of laughter coming up my body, and it kept getting stuck in my throat. So I had to go outside to have the release of this emotion, and I laughed for probably a good hour, like belly pains of laughter, and keeled over laughter. And at the time, I didn't understand what it was. Obviously, it was a release of suppressed joy and suppressed love and suppressed happiness, and then I started to communicate with the mushrooms, and I asked, okay, what's this about? And they said, like, you've got so much love and joy within. Share it, express it. The world is full of love and full of joy. Remove your armor sometimes and learn to enjoy life and laugh and have fun. And I was like, wow, that's a powerful message. And then I asked them, okay, just take me wherever I need to go. And I went on a mental trip that gave me a lot of insights and answers and awareness as to why I do what I do today in terms of the modern warrior movement. And again, part of that experience as well was a release of tears. And at the time, they felt like tears of relief. But maybe the relief was related to actually being able to express the tears. So I went from, this is a long trip. This went over a few hours. The start of the trip was a lot of laughing. The end of the trip was a lot of crying. So I had those sort of expressed emotions that I had suppressed for many, many years. Yeah. Because there's a lot of shame around feelings for men, I feel. And even shame around happiness, joy, fun, laughter. You know, we're told to get up, grind, take life seriously. You know, it's all about work, work, work. And we're sort of tied into this capitalistic system of drive forward, progress. There's no time for laughter. There's no time for joy. And then you wonder why you're waking up on a Sunday morning every weekend with a hangover. And, you know, alcohol is used as a release of those emotions. So we're caught in that sort of trap, perhaps. And I found that was my journey for a long time. Although what's important to say here as well is that I've done 10 years of talk therapy and journaling and all those types of modalities before I ever took mushrooms. You know, there's a whole process there that I went on before I got to that point. And that ultimately broke the ceiling for me to go a little bit further and give me more information to then implement into my life. It's like, okay, like I've done all this work. I know all this now. I have incredible awareness, but I just feel like I'm still a little bit stuck here. I feel there's more. And the mushrooms broke that ceiling and brought me into a whole new realm of understanding and awareness. And I can then take that and implement it into my life. So I think that's what's important to understand as well, is that, and I think you'll agree, but to hear your opinion on it, it's, you use the plant medicines or the psychedelics or the psilocybin to give you further awareness and information in terms of what needs to be applied into your life afterwards. And that's where the real work happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, kind of two things there. There's like the preparation almost, and then there's the integration. And, you know, anybody I worked with now at Psychedelics through Inwardbound, they do 6 weeks of preparation. So it's to get everybody up to speed on a bunch of practices, you know, journaling, self-inquiry, shadow work, meditation, breath work, somatic release, calming the nervous system. All of these things really help you in a psychedelic journey, you know, to release, to let go, to ask yourself those questions, to surrender. So yeah, by having that preparation, it's wonderful. You know, people who come on our retreats, they might have never done any spiritual practices. So we want to get them, or personal development practice, or psychology practices, or anything. So we want to get them up to speed. And then those people who have done years of meditation or whatever, you know, they're always able to drop deeper. You know, even people who've been through AA, who've come on our retreats, they have that whole AA program, which is a very spiritual program. You know, I think the founder originally based it off LSD, or he was taking LSD and he almost wanted that to be incorporated or something around that. But there's a lot of steps there already to, you know, humble yourself, to surrender, to be able to let go. So yeah, people who've done those practices can always go that bit deeper. It's the same with there was a paper out a few years ago where they gave Buddhist meditators who have like 10,000 hours worth of meditation, which is a lot of meditation, to take psychedelics and to go into those spaces. And they found that those who had done the 10,000 hours compared to the placebo were able to really relax into the experience, were less nervous, less fearful, able to go deeper. So yeah, preparation really, really matters when it comes to psychedelics. And yeah, really knowing if they're right for you as well. So there was obviously a moment in your life where you're like, yeah, I need to break that ceiling. This is a time where I'm going to introduce something totally different. And you were able to push through the stigma and, you know, the societal
the taboos,
the taboos, to be able to access them. And I think, you know, in terms of how society probably would have been, psychedelics would have been a rite of passage. You know, maybe a young man, young woman would have gotten to a point where the tribe would have pulled them aside because they have had a certain level of awareness and understanding, and we're like, right now you need to go and do your journey, you know, or now you need to, you know, go off and do your vision quest. And, you know,
you believe this was part of tribes from centuries ago? This was part of.
Absolutely, yeah. Sure, we had the Eleusinian mysteries in Greece. You had the Soma in India, and even if you look at the Bwiti in Africa with ibogaine, it's the rite of passage is when they take iboga for the young men. They have the iboga ritual.
Can you give us some information on just what you mentioned there? Because I'm actually unaware of those things too. The soma and the
So the Eleusinian Mysteries were thought to be a drink. It was a drink with maybe LSD in it. So LSD is derived from a fungus that grows on I think it's wheat or barley. So it's ergoline. And there was a drink that philosophers or learned people or the intellectual people at the time were allowed to go and have this experience once in their life, where they're allowed to go in a very secretive place and drink this magic potion, and they would have these profound experiences that then would inform them the rest of their lives. The soma is thought to be a drink from India, and people think it was potentially mushrooms, or maybe a derived LSD, or maybe a high dose of THC or something like this, that the Brahmins, the spiritual people, were allowed to drink and then access these kind of mystery, esoteric, divine spaces that would then inform their belief systems and how they live their lives, connecting to higher power, having that direct phone. Or Christianity, you need to go through the priest and go through the system, so you were allowed to have these experiences, these mystical experiences that would then change your life, and other people would know you would have had those experiences. So it would have almost been, a rite of passage, or it would have been kind of like unlocking the next level in whatever organization you were in. And I think it's probably the same in South America with ayahuasca and peyote. I think the children get to a certain age and then they're allowed to partake in an ayahuasca ceremony, or they're allowed to partake in a San Pedro or a peyote ceremony. So, there are cultures still alive now that kind of have those rites of passage and checks and balance, where I like to think, maybe it was part of the Druidic order here in Ireland, where, you got to a certain point, you maybe became a Druid, and then you're allowed to access this secret knowledge, or this hidden knowledge that was contained in, for Ireland, probably Liberty Caps, psilocybin containing mushrooms, or Amanita muscaria, fly alagaric mushrooms. So
I had a very Druid experience as well during my trip. Yeah,
really,
I was back in Druid times. Yeah,
wow.
It was unexplainable, as you know, but just felt like I was right back there in Druid times. Yeah,
wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Like I 100% think the Druids were working with psilocybin containing mushrooms. If you look at our sacred sites in Ireland, mushrooms grow all around them. Magic mushrooms. I say to people, if you ever want to find magic mushrooms in Ireland, just go to a sacred site in September. You'll find them there. And I think it's no coincidence that like some of these places that are power places were built, on these places where mushrooms grow. These energetic centers in Ireland, ley lines, or whatever people want to call them. And a lot of churches were then built on top of our sacred sites, because these were the places that people were always going on pilgrimage to, and they were Catholicized, deconstructed, and churches were built on them.
Did religion destroy this, or was it capitalism, or was it the Industrial Revolution, or was it?
Oh yeah,
because you're empowering people to make their decisions, and
I think, well, for Ireland it was definitely religion. Anything that was seen as esoteric, mystical, to do with the using of nature was almost like tabooed. You were a witch, so there was the Inquisition. All the witches were killed. These would have been the wise women, the women who would have worked with the herbs, would have worked with the land, would have worked with psychedelics. So they were all burned and killed because they held power ultimately at the end of the day. And then the Druids as well. They were the kind of the powerful people in Irish society, and they were kind of I suppose also killed or dismantled. So I feel like early on it was religion, for sure. It was a disconnection from your personal sovereignty to the land and nature and your own mind. Religion wants people to think in a certain way and to believe a certain dogma, and
fear-based,
and to go through a power structure. And then I suppose in America in the 1960s, when psychedelics started to become more prolific in society again. You know, there was pushback against working and the Vietnam War and racist tension at the time. So I feel like, yeah, that was also a, you know, toe the line sort of thing. It's like you do psychedelics and you drop out of mainstream society. You can't be having that because then you're not a worker, you're not producing. And then also pushing back against, I suppose, the capitalistic agenda, pushing back against war. And yeah, there were so many clinical trials happening at the time that in the 60s from people like Stanislav Grof, you know, the founder of holotropic breathwork, that were shown that psychedelics are really beneficial for people with depression and PTSD. You know, we've known that from the 60s. And other psychedelics, you know, psilocybin and LSD, mostly LSD at the time, actually. So, you know, there's also the piece there of big pharma too. You know, if you could take, you know, psilocybin 3 times, then you won't need to be on SSRIs for your whole life. For most people, not everybody, you know. Or if you take 1 dose of LSD, you could cure your PTSD, then you don't need to be going through 10 years of talk therapy.
Yeah.
You know,
antidepressants.
And so, like, I think there's a few things, and it's still the battle that's going on right now. You know, there's the Citizens for Drugs Assembly here in Ireland last year. And there was still pushback, you know, it's still very fear-based, you know, it's still very one-sided. You know, I heard from several people that, you know, the way we're still looking at it is a criminal issue rather than a health issue. You know, it's like, oh, these substances are bad, they're causing gangs and they're causing illegal trade, and, you know, people are getting sick from them, and, you know, fentanyl is in stuff and it's killing people in the States, and, you know, bad heroin, all that sort of stuff. But if things were like taxed, legalized, decriminalized, put through a healthcare model, people would be safe from a lot of those issues. You know, it's very, very black and white. So then what's the underlying agenda there? Well, it disrupts power structures in terms of the pharmaceutical industry, in terms of the legal system as well. You know, I'm sure I've heard so many cases of people being pulled through the courts for like a gram of cannabis, you know, and who's getting all those kickbacks? You know what I mean? It's, that person, his life's ruined if they get one single conviction. You know, they can't get jobs, can't travel. Where it could be more in a decriminalized health approach. So, you know, there's still a lot of those issues happening, and it's still around stigma and rigid beliefs. But, you know,
and religion.
Yeah, absolutely, religion. But for me, you just look at the science. You know, as I said, I'm a scientist. You just look at the data. Like, you know, if our society is informed by science, then why are we ignoring the science of psychedelics? The science of psychedelics that shows that people are being helped and healed and having better, more healthy lives if they go through a psychedelic ceremony or psychedelics in a clinic, if they need to go through a clinic. So why are we still dragging our feet with regards to those things, you know? And some countries are ahead of others, you know, like Australia have been the first country in the world to say psilocybin and MDMA are medicine, you know, so they've adopted into the medical model. Now, you know, that's amazing, Australia are doing that, but like, why aren't we doing that in Ireland? You know, why can't we be the global leaders of psilocybin and MDMA?
Is there lack of education and information around it in terms of, like, when you are sold a antidepressant or given an antidepressant, there's a whole story around it. And antidepressants have been shown to be placebo drugs. At the end of the day, there's a story behind the antidepressant that really creates a transition in the individual. But there's not a lot of information around psilocybin in terms of, okay, you take this and this is what happens when you consume this psilocybin, consume this mushroom. What does happen when you, from a scientific or from a physiological perspective, what does happen when you consume psilocybin?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's probably as much information out there on psilocybin as there is some of the SSRIs.
Yeah.
You know, so psilocybin has been around for whatever, hundreds of thousands of years.
But it's not mainstream.
But it's not mainstream. But like, even I've been to a bunch of science conferences the last few years, and there's perfect evidence there to show that it helps people with very little side effects for a certain cohort of people. Now, obviously, people who have like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, they need to go through, you know, some more rigid tests. But that's like with any medication.
Psilocybin is part of paracetamol, is it? Is it part of mainstream medication to some degree, like small doses?
Not quite sure what you mean by that.
Like that it's part of the ingredient?
No.
It's not part of that.
No, so psilocybin is a tryptamine. So it's
Okay.
part of the tryptamine family of psychedelics, along with DMT, psilocin, 5-MeO, DMT, and it's molecularly very similar to serotonin. So it works on the serotonin system in the brain. So it binds to a part of this, the serotonin.
The reason I'm bringing it up because somebody told me about it. So that's
Really?
that's misinformation.
Yeah, really. Well,
Yeah.
Well,
So-
maybe it's something I don't know, but
Yeah.
it's the first time I've come across that. So psilocybin binds to the 5-HT2A receptor in the brain and causes a signaling transduction cascade that causes, an effect on the serotonin system in the brain. Serotonin is the feel good, happy hormone. You get a lot of it when you eat chocolate, go for a run, have sex. So people can have this sense of overwhelming happiness and, joy. And it's been shown that when people do psychedelics, that it causes a whole host of brain activity. Some parts of the brain are kind of switched off, kind of reduced, and then some parts are kind of heightened and lightened up. So I think it's a prefrontal cortex, or that part of the brain that is enhanced. So this is the most evolved part of the brain where we have higher cognitive abilities. But most interestingly, the part of the brain that is known as the default mode network,
the lizard brain.
Yeah, the lizard brain. There is a reduction in blood flow there, which reduces connectivity in that part of the brain. So when this part of the brain is turned off, people ruminate less, they hold on to less rigid beliefs, they hold on to less identity. So this is thought to be the part of the brain that is the seat of the ego. So, Eckhart Tolle talks a lot about this. When we have identification with something so strongly, it's really bound to our ego. And when that's contested, it causes, defense and aggressiveness and anger and negativity. So when this part of the brain is kind of switched off or turned off, there can be a new way of seeing yourself, a new belief system can be brought in. You kind of have a reduction in that kind of negative, pessimistic part of you if you're suffering with depression or anxiety. So when that's switched off, it can give people huge relief. They can almost think or feel a different way for the first time in their lives. And that's what people say they experience during psychedelic ceremonies, is like their mind is different, their thoughts are different, because, this kind of connectivity in the brain is totally changed. And there's also really cool diagrams which shows that different parts of the brain are connected that wouldn't normally be connected. So, people have this kind of increased creative thinking, divergent thinking that the science shows now, like thinking outside the box. You kind of, put things together that you wouldn't normally put things together. You get more clarity, you get more understanding. And then you also have like some of the psychedelic effects. You see colors, you smell colors,
vibrance.
The synesthesia. So yeah, that's kind of what goes on molecularly in the brain. And then, just to swing back to, you were talking about, you have these huge experiences, and then the real work is in the integration. It's really putting whatever has happened to you during the psychedelic ceremony into practice, into action. Because if you don't, then it's just lost. It's just a weekend. You had fun. You had some crazy experiences. But if you don't actually enact anything, nothing will actually change in your life. Things might change on a subtle level with the body and with the mind. But if you get like big messages on, needing to clean up your health, exercise more, quit your job, travel, live a different life, do a different job, pursue a purpose, those things are always going to keep coming back to you. No matter how many psychedelic ceremonies you do, you're going to get the same message, And Timothy Leary, he famously said, once you get the message, you hang up the phone, So you get the message, and then you go out into the world and you enact what you've learned, what you've understood about yourself. And there's lots of different practices then that can help you keep that level of awareness, that level topped up. So, the preparation is a big piece, and then the integration is a big piece. And that's a lot of the work I do with people in terms of taking them through that process, whether they do a psychedelic ceremony with me or they do a psychedelic ceremony with someone else. It's like, all right, how can we work with all of this material? You saw God, you had universal oneness, you had a shamanic experience, you had a kind of a big psychological experience. How can we work with that? And I think that's what makes a lot of my work different when I mentor people, is that I have such a breadth and wealth of knowledge around the mystical, the shamanic, the esoteric, the spiritual, and the psychological, that I'm able to weave it all together. Whereas a lot of people go to their psychotherapist or their therapist after a psychedelic experience, and they're, the therapist is just way out of their depth. They're like, whoa, they've never done a drug. Drugs are bad. This person now has addiction issues. That's a lot of the time I hear that's how it's framed. Where if I meet people, I'm like, great, you had a shamanic experience. Tell me more about it. You're a wolf and you ran through the woods and then you met this deer and the deer represented your feminine side and the wolf ate the deer. And, it's like, how can we unpack this now? How can we see what's going on? Because for me, psychedelics are non-specific amplifiers of your consciousness. So whatever's down there in your subconscious is brought to the surface, similar to the way shamanic practices work. It's accessing your subconscious, and breathwork practices accessing your subconscious and working with dreams as well. So whatever's coming up there, it's like, all right, what are the symbols? What does this mean for you through your lens? Not necessarily me prescribing anything to you, because like my associations to things are different to someone else's associations. So being able to work in that kind of shamanic way kind of helps people a lot, because they feel understood. They feel like they're not losing their shit. That was a big thing for me very early on. I felt like, I was losing my shit. I was doing all these psychedelics. I was seeing the world in a very different way. My value system changed. What I wanted to do with my life changed. What I, appreciated, what I was grateful for, everything was like shifting. And when you're in a society that doesn't value a lot of the things that they should value, it's very difficult.
A lot of pushback,
yeah, a lot of pushback. So a lot of people feel like the black sheep, So I work with a lot of black sheeps, which is great, because I'm more of a colourful sheep now from a black sheep. It's like
the loneliness factor is a massive thing there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's relative to any change that you go through in your life. You're having to leave people behind. You have to leave ideas behind. You have to leave certain values behind, and then you move forward and you're moving on your own, and you step into this empty space, and that empty space can be so uncomfortable that you tend to default back into what was comfortable.
100%. And that's actually how I started men's work, would you believe? So myself and Rob, who is my business partner and friend, who we run Inwardbound Institute, with the retreats, we originally started a men's group. It must be nearly 7 years ago now. We started in Dublin. And the men's group was called the Psychedelic Brothers. And still going. We have a Facebook group. I need to make an Instagram.
Cool.
But so this was a men's group. There was a few men's groups going on at the time. But very little at the time, 7 years ago. Now it's wonderful to see so many. But our group was different from any of the, the Mankind Project and stuff like that was happening at the time, in terms of we were welcoming all men who've had any experience. We were welcoming people who'd done plant medicine, had traveled the world, had psychedelic experiences, had spiritual experiences. It was a group where like, come and bring whatever. There was no shame, no judgment, no guilt. And a lot of the men that were coming to the first groups were men who'd done psychedelics, maybe 10 years, 20 years ago. People who traveled to the Amazon, done psychedelics in the 90s and came back and were completely alien, to their friends and families. So our men's group was trying to combat this sense of loneliness and isolation that so many men feel. So running that group was wonderful, because we really explored a lot of these different topics that are now quite fashionable, shadow work and father wound, and we did breath works, and we had all these different practices, we had sacred geometry and death, many different amazing groups early on, and talking about psychedelic experiences as well. So that was kind of a little kind of nudge into why I started men's work. Was I wanted to connect with men who are having these experiences, or having these spiritual experiences, or these psychedelic experiences, or entheogenic experiences, and bringing them together and creating this kind of like, I suppose, supportive environment.
Was it also at the beginning of that? Was it also because you felt quite lonely and isolated?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like, I'm the type of person that if I need it in my life and it's not happening, I will create it. So, I saw that this wasn't happening. And I felt like I was at that time connecting to amazing men. All those men were like nearly 10 years older than me. And they'd all been on their journeys. So I wanted to create a space where we were able to connect with men of all ages, and to know and let men know it's safe to have these kind of experiences or share these experiences that society tells you are kind of like, a little bit too hippie or wacky or, too esoteric or too mystical. It's like, yeah, come, bring them. I want to hear it all. Like it's real, if it's real for you, then it's real, So yeah, it was wonderful to bring all of these men together. And this really catapulted me on my journey because I was learning every circle I do still to date. I learn so much. Every retreat I hold, every ceremony I hold, I'm learning. The participants are learning, always humble to the knowledge and what I don't know. So these people were bringing all of their life experience, and we can learn so much from each other's life experience. And that's why I love holding the men's circles and mixed circles and the psychedelic ceremonies. We do a lot of circle work. It's like everybody has an opportunity now to listen and to learn. And that's, I think, the power of working in community. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But then a lot of these groups or a lot of the psychedelic work and a lot of the work I do as well, there are a lot of barriers around these men.
Mm-hmm.
And, shame is one thing, but then there's also the societal expectations or societal standards. And, you have to have your 9-to-5 job and you get your weekly wage and, you're working towards a pension and you have to have a family and a car and the house and like all these expectations that men just, they create a cage around that almost. And they're trapped within the cage of these expectations and standards. And also within that, there's for a lot of men especially, the expectation of alcohol and drinking, and that's how we socialize, and it's just, again, acceptable and normal as part of everyday life or every week life in Ireland, which is, and alcohol being one of the most destructive drugs out there in the world. How do we begin to break down those barriers for these men to potentially see things from a new perspective and live life from a new perception?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I've over the years, 7 years doing men's work now, it's like I've had so many calls and messages with men to try and get them to sign up. And most of a lot of resistance, and most of the time it's not even from a business perspective. It's like, man, if you come, you will genuinely, feel better. I know that for a fact, but I think it's this real big piece on shame. And at the moment I'm kind of studying shame and really trying to get to grasp with it. Because, shame I feel is one of those emotions that, people aren't so able to catch. They're not so aware of. What is it inherently? It's a feeling of, I am bad. It's an identification with you being bad. Whereas, guilt, which is very closely linked to shame, is I have done something bad, not I have, badness on me, attached to it. So yeah, I really love the work of Brené Brown. She's one of the top shame researchers in the world, and she says, shame dies when stories are told in safe spaces. So if we share our challenges, our struggles, the things that we feel rotten, terrible, bad about in a safe space, it helps to clear it. It dies. The shame dies. Now, recently I've had another dark night of the soul with a breakup and a separation, and I felt a lot of shame around it. And it was only when I started to share my feelings with, the people that are privileged enough to get to know me on a deeply personal level, that I felt that the shame was clearing. So being able to share those parts of ourselves that we feel are so unlovable, so ugly, so messy, that we won't be loved if we share these things, cause such depression and negativity and self-hatred. So when we have the opportunity to share that with somebody who is close and, most likely it's a therapist or a loved one, then it helps to dissipate that shame. So I feel like men's circles and plant medicine ceremonies where we have circles, people can share things and be accepted and not judged, and can be understood and can be compassionately received and empathetically received. That's where the power is, I feel. So people can clear stuff that maybe they've been holding on to for years, or maybe it's fresh. So I really feel that, creating safe spaces and letting men know that there is somewhere where you can just be yourself. Nobody's here to compete with you. Nobody's here to judge you. You just show up exactly how you are, and all of you is welcome. So everything is welcome, from the good, the bad, the ugly, the happy, the sad, the glad. It's all welcome. And when people feel that they can be themselves and step into a space where you can just be open and authentic, that creates a huge opportunity for connection and self-love, and and a community of people. So I really feel like that's the power of men's work, and that's the power of a lot of the plant medicine work, is that kind of communities are built out of these groups, because people can truly connect to themselves and can connect to others. And that's a big part of my work with the psychedelic work and the men's work. People can connect to themselves, each other, and nature, to find their own healing and take responsibility for themselves and their lives. And then when they have that ability to do that, then they have a circle of people around them they trust and can be open and authentic with. So yeah.
What if they're not ready for that step yet?
What if they're not ready? Yeah, I think it's a responsibility piece. People have to have to want to change. That's also a big learning for people. You can't change anybody else. Change has to want to come from within. And maybe some people will never want to change, and that's really, really challenging. But for me, it comes down to compassion, loving kindness, and listening. It's like, if you can offer that to somebody else, and really, really offer, a listening and an understanding, and connect on an empathetic level, that, hopefully that you will plant a seed in that person that will then, be able to be watered by themselves, that then they will create that change themselves from within, or at least you will embody something that they will be able to see or perceive or experience, that they will say, oh, how did you get that? Why are you so happy? How are you living such a joyous, purposeful life? You go to so many festivals and travel around the world. What are you doing that's creating the life like this? And, it's like, well, are you open to listening? Are you open to hearing what I have to say? It's like really checking in with the person, because some people won't want to hear. They will just be like, oh, he's a bollocks. He's, doing whatever he wants to do. He's living his life, tall poppy syndrome, begrudgery. They'll also point shame and negatively project everything onto you. But will they actually listen to your story? Will they actually be open to hearing your experience? So I think for those people who are stuck, all we can do is share our experience. And in my experience, that helps to create, a little bit of curiosity in people. I think it's the worst thing if we tell people, oh, you need to do this, or you need to go that, or you need to do this. It's quite disempowering. But if we just share, oh, this worked for me, or I did this, and listen to them, listen to their story, and go, really understand, and be there in it with them. I think if we have that empathy and we're there, like, yeah, that's, I can understand from my experience, that's the same as me. If we can create that connection and bond, there's that openness. And
sometimes you're not ready for that, to reach out for help, and there's certain tools that you need to begin to cultivate or find in your own personal space to then have the courage or increase the awareness to then know that, okay, I need help here, or I've gone so far on my own and now I need to reach out to someone. So for me personally, my personal development journey or healing journey started, whatever it was, 12 years ago. And at the time, I found it quite bizarre, but I was drawn towards certain self-help books. The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, I think, was one of the first books I read. And I started this bit of routine of going to a coffee shop, and I take the book and I start reading, and then the words would just resonate with me. This is amazing. This is really landing with me. This is really connecting. And I remember actually somewhere around that process of stepping back and asking, why am I drawn towards these books? Because I maybe 3 or 4 self-development books read at that stage. Why am I drawn towards this? Oh, there's actually some answers I'm looking to find in my life. And again, some awareness came, and then I thought, okay, I need to go a little bit further and reach out for help and, explore this a bit more. Journaling as well it still is a huge part of my routine every morning. So for someone who's listening today, who's maybe not ready to reach out for help with someone else, but feels like they're stuck or feels alone or feels lonely, what are some of these strategies or tools that they could use? Is it a sort of a trial and error process, or is there something that you would strongly advocate towards in terms of starting that process for themselves?
Yeah. So what I hear from you there is you were seeking, you were seeking change, and I think seeking comes through maybe meeting someone profound in your life where their presence just makes you question things, and people have that experience. Another way is through suffering, which it was certainly for me. I was at a point where I was suffering so much that I needed to change something in my life because my life wasn't working and it was causing me physical pain, or mental anguish and mental pain. So there's seeking, there's suffering, and then maybe like self-help. You want to read a book. You come across a book, someone gives you a book, or you hear a book on a podcast, and then you go and you get it and you read it, and then you start to question things. And for a lot of guys, I actually hear it's The Secret. Have you heard of this book, The Secret?
I've heard of it. I've not.
Yeah, neither have I. I think it's I have my opinions on it, but people read a book like that and then they go, "Whoa, oh my God, I can change my life. I can manifest things," and da 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 da. And
I have more control and power than I realize.
Yeah, and it causes a kind of a cascade. Another one I really think is solitude, and I think this is really, really important for men. Just get out into nature and stand somewhere that is majestic or is beautiful, or sit under a tree and just be in that solitude. Turn off your phone and just be with yourself and just be with your thoughts and be with your mind. And I suppose that is quite hard to do for a lot of people out there, because the whole world, it is designed around grabbing your attention and
go, move, progress.
Yeah, and distraction and kind of numbing.
Yeah.
So I think if we give ourselves solitude and spaciousness, time to really just be, that, what can arise in your consciousness or your mind can be super profound, And I hear this from a lot of people that come on the retreats, that they live such busy lives that they haven't had a moment without their phone in many years, So, we always prescribe like time in nature, and that some people say is some of the hardest time on the retreats, because they have to go out into nature by themselves without their phone for an hour. Whoa, It's like, for a lot of people in the world, that's difficult.
Or you're left with your feelings, your thoughts, and all the pain that's attached to those feelings and thoughts. It's, quite overwhelming sometimes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of people that, they can only be out with music even, they need that extra layer of something, noise. Being with their own thoughts is difficult. I've been there. I know how it is. So yeah, I think they're probably some of the reasons that people might want to change their lives. And then come back to the question again. What was the specific question?
Well, what are some of the modalities or strategies that someone right now today could potentially grab and use in order to create maybe a sense of courage or curiosity in terms of making a change in their life?
Yeah, I definitely think psychedelics for sure is one.
But what if you're not ready for that?
Yeah.
It's okay, I'm alone.
Yeah.
I know I feel a sense of emptiness, or I feel a sense of pain.
Yeah.
But they're reluctant to, go and try psychedelics. That's a massive leap. They're maybe reluctant to reach out for help, because that to a lot of people is, and again, the shame factor.
Yeah.
For a lot of men, I want to be seen as someone who has power and control and can solve my own problems, this sort of conditioning.
Yeah.
So they perhaps don't have the courage or the awareness to know that that's the route they need to take. So what are some strategies, tools they can use in order to cultivate that awareness and harness the courage to then go to the next level?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we definitely journaling, like you mentioned, guided meditation, because I think meditation just by yourself in silence can be very, very challenging for people who haven't done it. So having an app like Insight Timer where you can listen to a guided meditation really helps. Going to a yoga class can also be, really useful for people getting into the body, slowing down. It's guided. It's very meditative.
And something a lot of men are resistant towards.
Yes, men are a lot really resistant towards that as well. I think sports, sports is wonderful. I think a lot of men fall out of sports, like I did with university. I used to play tag rugby for a long time, until my hips were just saying no more. Something like that as well. Like
you're connected with other individuals, or connected to something more than you.
Yeah, absolutely. And one that comes to mind as well is sea swimming as well. Getting into the body ultimately, getting into the body. creating the endorphins through sports, through exercise, through hiking, nature, and yeah, cold water immersion definitely helps. And for me, it's like community. And I know it can be hard to join something that you've never joined before, but you know, you work with a lot of warriors, and I think having that warrior spirit of, you know, stepping up, stepping out into the world, you know, only you are the one that can be courageous. Only you are the one that can cultivate bravery. So, you know, pushing your edges or leaning into the edge to this kind of stretch zone. You know, if you want to grow, you have to get out of your comfort zone, you know, and like jumping into cold water, joining a community, going to a yoga class, that is already a big win. So if you look down on paper and see like, how can I get a big win today? It's like, I can go to that yoga class. I can go to that swimming group. I can go for a hike in nature. I can join something, you know, a men's group, a hiking group. It doesn't have to be around healing or anything. It can be, just a hiking group or a sports group or whatever. And that can be an instant win. You can go, you can show up and you can say, well, this is not for me. And then you can try something else. You can go to a meditation class like I did, 10 years ago. I turned up. I was so nervous. I was so anxious. Who are all these people? What is this place? But I sat there, you know, and I felt connected to the group and the people, and very quickly realized, oh, everyone is here for the same reason I'm here. You know, so having that instant connection to community can be a huge win for people, you know.
And how does the work that you've done, how do you integrate that now as a father to your daughter?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, and time with my daughter, I cultivate presence and quality time. So when I'm with her, I try not to be on my phone, and I spend a lot of time in nature. We go on little adventures together. And for me, I speak to her from a point of, you know, I love you, always telling her I love her. Trying to, like, she's only 2.5, and I ask, you know, how are you feeling? You know, and I tell her I'm feeling like this, you know, trying to get that like conscious dialogue. So for me, it's, you know, how can I raise someone with conscious awareness, you know, when she does something crazy, or bold, you know, I just take a breath and try not to react. So, you know, having like my Vipassana practice there of non-reactivity, just allowing, you know, accepting everything for what is. And I read something really, really beautiful there the other day. So when your child is having a tantrum, and, you know, my daughter's had a few little tantrums, I kind of zone out and think of myself, wow, if I'm 80 years old, looking back at this moment, you know, this moment would be so beautiful to have again. So it's like, how can I be in this moment and just enjoy it for what it is, even if she is having a tantrum, not trying to prescribe or react with negativity or anger. Just allow it to be, you know, she's just a little human learning to regulate herself, learning to understand herself. You know, if I'm 80, wouldn't I be so grateful to have this moment again, you know, when she's like 2.5, like, wah. So, you know, I just try and zoom out a lot, you know, it's like detach from the experience and just watch with just like kind of pure loving awareness, and just allow her to flourish and be. But yeah, conscious parenting is such a journey. It's something that was, I suppose, catalyzed in my life quicker than I had anticipated, like, you know, most people. But it's like, yeah, how can I just create an environment of acceptance, non-judgment, compassion, empathy for this little soul to enjoy and grow in? So yeah, quality time is important, presence. And then, you know, I see her as every day is a ceremony, you know, every day is a psychedelic trip with a child, you know, and it's like, how can I integrate that now into my life? So, you know, we do things that I love. We go hiking, we go nature, we, you know, read, we go walk for walks, we swim. And I think, you know, what I find works for me in my life and makes me happy, I want to pass that on to her so that she can have access to those things. And by sure, she's already doing a little bit of breath work. She's already doing a little bit of meditation. You know, we sit down and do our breaths together and just have quiet time. And, you know, she doesn't understand, but it's kind of cultivating those little practices now, you know, and shaking the body and dancing and moving, and we do art. And it's like, yeah, all of these little practices I use in my life, how can I just like, yeah, say like, these are okay for you to do, and kind of cultivate them for her.
How do you manage the absence between yourself and your daughter, that being a single father? That must be quite difficult.
Yeah, it's a very big challenge. You know, I think, you know, being a single dad comes with a whole host of difficulties, and so does a single mother. You know, they're not something that can be compared. They have their own things. There is definitely a sense of, I miss her. But for me, I had a really deep teaching a number of years ago around missing someone. And that was in relation to the death of my grandmother. So what is missing someone? I think missing someone is, I am not happy with my present moment right now. Something needs to change. I need to have this person close to me to be happy. So when I had the understanding that all I need to do is cultivate happiness in all of my present moments, I will never miss somebody. So that is my practice, to be always happy with my present moment, whether there's someone here or whether there isn't someone here. So when anybody dies in my reality, the practice is, can I be happy right now in my present moment? And for me, I tune into gratitude. I'm very grateful for my present moment. I go down through my list of things I'm grateful for. And then also in the past as well. It's like, I'm grateful for these things in the past too. So, I just cultivate gratitude in the moment, anchor myself into the presence. And it's a practice, and it's very, very, very difficult, because I think having a child is, having something you're attached to. It's the ultimate form of, how can I have no attachment? Because that's a lot of the spiritual practices. Don't attach to anything, because nothing is permanent. Everything is impermanent. So yeah, for me, it's like a practice of not having attachment, and practicing gratitude, happiness with the present moment. And hell, it's fucking hard. Some days I'm just like, oh, I wish she was here. I miss her little smile, or I see a little cup left out on the table, after I drop her home, and it's like, ooh, you get hit in the gut with those feelings, And I've talked to many single dads, and this is the hardest part, getting access, getting custody is such a mess for so many people in this country, and
especially for men.
Yeah, especially for men, and the whole legal system is absolutely backwards. I see myself as a feminist. I want equal rights for everybody, but men in Ireland do not have equal rights in the law system. Unfortunately, I know I've heard so many men get absolutely shafted in the legal system, and to fight really nasty battles where the exes are just out to stick the knife in and to make life difficult for them. And at the end of the day, it's about the child. It's about the kid,
They suffer the most, yeah.
They suffer the most because, most, it's kind of funny as well, most of the men that I meet, and I know a lot of women, like, the biggest issue they have is a father wound, And there's men out there that want to access their children for more time than what they're allowed to be given. So, this is just perpetuating the father wound, where the father can't show up, can't be present, and can't come to negotiation. So it's difficult, it's a really hard one to try and navigate that space, when egos are bruised and people are upset and people are angry and people are hurt. But at the end of the day, it comes back to the child, how can we both show up for the child? How can we provide an environment where, we don't pass our generational trauma onto them, which is the ultimate test, I think,
for sure.
Yeah.
No,
and I think each, if you're on a personal development spiritual path, each iteration in your family is going to help to clear some trauma. Everybody's going to experience trauma. We can't keep our children in a bubble. We learn from our mistakes and our hurt and our pain and our negativity. But yeah, I think the best thing I can do is do work on myself for my daughter. So that's kind of my mantra. Like, I'm showing up for myself, being a better person, living a more authentic, honest, integral life. And by doing that, that will provide a conducive healing to the growth and the spiritual development of my daughter.
Yeah. Guilt's a huge factor there, is it?
Guilt?
In terms of when you're not with her, you feel like she's potentially deprived of your absence to a certain extent?
Is it guilt? No, I don't think so. I think it was more the shame piece,
Yeah.
Inherently feeling bad that I can't be there for her. Not necessarily like a lifestyle choice, but
do you feel like she's lacking your presence when you're not there, and that sort of plays a factor in terms of your emotions?
No, I don't think so. Like, the feedback I have from her is like, she's great. She loves seeing me. She runs out the door, grabs me, and she we have a wonderful bond. So what I see in front of me is wonderful and beautiful. So,
and that's all the proof you need.
That's all the proof I need. When she turns around to me and just randomly says like, "I'm proud of you, Daddy. I love you, Daddy." That's,
and you're possibly more present with her than a father who's with his children every single day, possibly.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I'm with her, I'm with her. So I feel quite lucky that in my life, I work a week at a time, week on, week off for the retreats. And when I have her, I have her for the full week. It's me and her. We do everything together all day. I'm very lucky. And same with when she was born, I took 4 months off. What other father can do that in the world? It's very difficult. That's another challenge. Fathers just get 2 weeks paternity.
Yeah.
So I was very privileged to be there with her for the majority of her first 6 months of her life, to be able to fully connect with her and be there. And still now, I can take as many days off as I want on my own boss. The benefit of running your own business.
Yeah.
So I feel like, the quality time that I have with her is very precious. And when I'm there, it's my spiritual practice. It's like, how can I show up as present and as loving as possible with this little person? With this
amazing,
little
man. Yeah, well done, man. That
Thanks.
Doesn't come easy. I know that.
Not at all. And that's what I was saying. It's like, you gotta go into the depths of your soul, the shadow, and work through the shame and the guilt. And like I was saying, the work of Brené Brown really changed the last 2 years for me. Just reading some of her stuff, it was just like, yes, it totally clicks. It's you can only be the best version of yourself each day. You can constantly improve by like 1%, but how you show up each day, if you're showing up as the best you can that day, and if your best is just getting up and going out for a walk, then that's all you can do. So it's having compassion for yourself, having love for yourself, self-love, and if you're able to cultivate that and operate from that place, then I think you're a wonderful parent.
Thank you, Darragh. Really enjoyed this conversation with you, and
amazing.
Absolutely love the work you're doing, of course, and excited for what's to come. And for all the listeners to the podcast, where can they find you? Potentially reach out, join one of your groups or one of your retreats. Let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and thanks so much for having me on. Wonderful. Always love doing podcasts and getting to know people and their perspective. And wonderful to hear that you're going down the psychedelic route. I'm sure the people that you work with will benefit so much from having those experiences too, which I think is very important. If you're talking about these things, you should have those experiences.
Yeah, I can relate.
Yeah. Instagram at Darragh Stewart. If you want to come on a psychedelic retreat, they're in the Netherlands with inwardbound.nl. And then men's retreats here in Ireland. Just through my Instagram or my personal page, innerwork.ie. And mentoring through my personal page, innerwork.ie. So
brilliant.
Always happy to connect.
Excellent, man. Those links are below. Check them out. And until next time, man, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Stay strong.